A very good day to all of you out there. This is Admav here with another episode of Admav's Corner. Welcome on this Friday, October 7th, 2022. As always, I'm happy to have you here, and I hope you're doing well. This week has been good, if not a little bit tiring. I've mentioned in the past before, where I work, every month we have new rotations, and this was the first week of the new rotations, and it's been particularly busy. Although towards the end of the week, it kind of tapered off and kind of became a little bit more chill. But still, it is a busy week, and you kind of have to settle into the new rotation. But after the first week, it usually becomes, it normalizes and it just feels like work, which is fine because currently I enjoy my work. And part of the reason why there are many reasons why I enjoy my current work, right? I mean, I work in pharmaceutical distribution, and that sort of gives me some kind of purpose because I feel like what we do matters in our immediate community, so we help our immediate community around us, including some of the vaccines that we shipped out. Now, I myself have been part of that freezer team, making sure that we properly pack them and make sure they get shipped out in a timely manner so that people can receive them. And these days, I know it's not the biggest thing anymore, as we're essentially out of the pandemic, like freshly out of the pandemic. Most of the world has just acknowledged and recognized the fact that the pandemic is effectively over, although it's still best practice to be hygienic and to be respectful of those around us. So if we're feeling sick, you can wear a mask if you wish. It just helps prevent the spread of germs whenever you're feeling a little under the weather or feeling a little fluish. But the other part of this job that makes me feel like I'm doing something that matters or something that's a net positive in the world is that I get to work with a lot of younger partners, younger colleagues who are like 10 years younger than I am. And that really, in some ways, that really does make me feel like an old man. I'm only 33. 33 is not that old, but I know at the same time it's there. It's getting up there, but it's still fairly young. But when I'm around these young partners who are like 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, you can really feel a difference in attitudes. That's for sure. I mean, there's still a bit of high school left in some of these kids, and the way that they behave at work, or the way that they even see the work. I mean, this work isn't glamorous at all. It's a blue-collar job. The title has been modified to sound a little better, but really it's warehouse associate, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with a blue-collar job. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It pays well. It pays decently. It's a fairly secure job as long as you're not messing around at work. So for now, I'm pretty satisfied. But the reason why I not necessarily enjoy, but why it feels like rewarding is because whenever I get a chance to speak to these 20-something-year-olds, right, with a lot of them, I sense a lot of anxiety and doubt in the future. And that's something that I relate to because in some ways I still harbor those feelings, but I'm much more mature now and I can see it differently and act differently and accordingly to those thoughts. But when you're that age, when there's a lot of uncertainty and you're not sure and you get anxious, I feel that. And for me, I like being around for these young individuals because I want to reassure them that things are going to end up being okay. I don't know if it's going to be okay, right? Like we talk about this all the time on this podcast. I don't know if things are going to be okay, but you kind of have to believe that things are going to be okay. And they will be. They really will. But you have to have that belief in yourself and in your future first. Even though you're in a tumultuous time, or a time that you don't really know where to go. You don't really know what path to take, or even where your path is going. You're just kind of walking on it, and you're worried you're missing the right turns. Like you just don't know. And I can empathize with that, because I still remember very much so what that was like when I was that age. And so to be able to provide that to partners, and I'm saying partners because that's what we call coworkers and colleagues at the company that I work for. So it's just a lingo that I've gotten used to. So if you were wondering why I'm saying partners, that's why. But yeah, I really love being able to do that. I'm not. I would never claim to be some sort of like life advice guru or someone that can give people answers or solutions. I'm not that. I'm still figuring out myself in many ways, despite the progress that I've made and everything that I've learned about myself and accepted about myself. But what I do enjoy doing is imparting and sharing some of the experiences that I've gone through, to at least provide another point of view, so that maybe they could take that point of view and extract something valuable out of it, or just something to think about that they can then think about for their own lives and for their own selves, and maybe make some changes, or feel more assured or sure-footed about how things are going. And really, that's not exclusive to the partners at work. I mean, that's what I try to do here too on this podcast, is to just share my story and my experiences and how I'm doing right now. All of that stuff. This week, I got to work again with one of those young partners that I mentioned. Again, I'm not going to say any real names, so in this case, I am just going to call him Scott, based on Scott the Woz, because he reminds me of Scott the Woz. He really does look like Scott the Woz, and I'm a huge fan of Scott the Woz. Shout out to Scott the Woz. You make amazing video game content. You're hilarious, but you also, you're hilarious. You're a bit of a goof, but there's actually a lot of information in his videos, despite how funny they are. Like he makes some funny observations that are both true and hilarious at the same time. So I recommend you go check out his channel. He's one of the good ones on YouTube. But yeah, Scott is a young man, and I relate to him a lot because, well, I mean, he's a quiet kid, but at the same time, he's still more social than I ever was at that age, or even have been, But he's usually by the book. He follows instructions to a T. He does things right. That's one thing. That's one thing Scott does well, is that he does things correctly. Very detail-oriented guy, and just comes across well as someone who is trying to figure out their path in life. And this week we got a chance to converse again about life, about the future, and yeah, no, he expressed that anxiety that I mentioned earlier. Expressed that he doesn't know where he's going, and that he feels like he went to school for nothing because it was not getting him to where he felt like he should be. And that's a key word, right? That should word. Should I be here? Is this where I should be? Well, it's a difficult question to ponder, because when you're saying things like, where should I be? It's like you're trying to figure out some place that you're supposed to be at, that's pre-decided for you, when really that's a place that you decide for yourself. You find that place and you decide whether you stay at that place or whether that is the place that you want to stay at. So when I hear that, that's totally normal to me, because those are normal thoughts that your mind goes through as a young person, as a young individual in this world, trying to figure out their place, trying to figure out their purpose, or if they're even doing anything relevant that makes life worth living, essentially. So Scott was sort of not lamenting, but I could tell that he was a little bit anxious and contemplative about his position right now in life. And even at work, he's thinking of potentially a way to get out, like an exit plan, because he feels like there's not much for him here. And I can really empathize with that. One thing about being that age, when you come out of high school, right? First of all, when you come out of high school, for most people, right, for most kids, and I know by the time you're in university, or you're likely 18 or turning 18, so technically you're not a kid, but 18 years old, you're a kid, all right? Even 20-year-olds seem like a kid to me, because I can remember myself and my friends at 20, and we were absolutely kids. With every friend that I talk to, and my core group of friends, we can't even imagine how how immature and unprepared we were for the world at 20-some. And I know sometimes maturity levels are different. They definitely vary between individual to individual. Some sort of progress and mature faster than others because of their situation in life or what's going on with themselves and their families. But in general, when you're 20, you don't feel it, but 10 years down the line, like me, now that I'm 33, when I look back on my 20s, I'm like, man, I was lost. I was lost and unsure, and I didn't behave well. It's because I'm comparing my then self to myself now, and I'm like wishing that I could behave and think the way that I do now when I was that age, but I would have never gotten here if I wasn't like that first. I had to learn these things. I had to learn that what I was doing was not the best or the most conducive to living a life where you can feel okay and even happy at times, and not content, but be sort of at peace, and have the ability to take on life and all of its moments, one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 second. You have to take it a moment at a time. But yeah, when we were talking about this, I was trying to explain to him that my friends, even myself, we went through the same thing at his age. We all had different paths, but we all went through a similar thing, a similar phase of turmoil where we felt like, where the hell am I going? What the hell am I doing here? Right? And speaking of myself, that's how it's always been for me. I mean, I haven't talked about this much in this podcast, so I guess I'll give a short history of how I got here, right? And it's a long one, and I don't want it to be a long one, so I'm going to try to kind of breeze through it, because there's a lot of different aspects of me going through life that I really kind of want to touch on in future episodes of the podcast. But as a quick summary, I had a fairly, decent upbringing. My parents are very loving, and they're still together. So the household was stable, to say the least. And you can even say maybe that I was a bit sheltered, which we can discuss in future episodes. But initially, school was good for me. I would get good grades. I would do decently up until grade 6, I guess, was when I stopped being academically excellent consistently. I mean, because when we moved to Canada in 2001, I started grade 7 here. My grades are mediocre. Grade 8, my grades are mediocre. A little bit better, but still pretty mediocre. There's reasons to that, but I won't get into it in this episode. But after elementary school, because in Canada, especially if you're in the Catholic school system, grade 8 is the final year of elementary before going to high school, which starts at grade 9. And high school for me was very, I don't know how to describe it really. Parts depressed, parts anxious. So much like now, but back then I thought that was like just a normal thing that you go through in high school. I don't know. I was like, oh, maybe I'm just, philosophical or whatever. Or that's just my personality, is that I'm brooding all the time, which turns out I had depression the whole time. But yeah, I didn't know that then. Not a lot of people even recognized that back then. We were kind of just throwing depression around as like very liberally, not as this disease, but just like, oh, I'm depressed. And like, what are you depressed about? Like, what do you have to be sad about? We didn't understand back then. People being aware, there weren't many people aware at the time. So yeah, high school was crap. High school was awful. I was invisible. My grades were not just mediocre. They were horrible in many ways. In a lot of subjects, I kind of skirted through. I don't even know how I passed. And that would continue on to college, actually. Actually, I didn't even know what I was going to do in university. I was following my friends a lot of them are going into various types of engineering in university. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be an engineer too, like my dad and my friends. Without really thinking about what that meant. Without really thinking about if that was something that I really wanted to do. I was picking it because I don't know what else to do. I'm like, what do I do after high school? I have no idea. And then sometime towards the second half of grade 12, which is the final year before graduation, I realized how insane that the idea of going to engineering was, considering my grades and my performances in some of the sciences and in all of the maths. My maths was horrible. I don't even know how I passed, but I passed. And I was like, if I'm barely passing, why the hell am I going into engineering? So I ended up taking a lap year, which is just like an extra half semester, an extra full year after graduation, to take a few more courses that you may need for a program that you didn't initially intend to go into. And in my case, that was nursing. The reason why I ended up choosing nursing was, out of all the subjects or classes in high school that I took, there were actually a few that I did fairly well on, and biology was one of them. And so it's funny because I was like, I'm either going to go into zoology because I'm into animals, or I'll go into nursing because two of my best friends took up nursing as well. And at the time I was learning about the profession and found out how much money they were making. And I thought, hey, that's a great career with a great salary. I'll make a lot of money being a nurse. And I'm kind of good at biology, so why not? And that's pretty much the reason why I got into nursing. And I mentioned zoology. I got rejected by the University of Guelph for that. I applied for it. My grades were not up to par. But I got into nursing. So I applied to a bunch of places for nursing, and I got into a few, and I chose this joint program between Conestoga and McMaster. And then I only spent 2 years there. Again, skipped all of my lectures. Essentially, I skipped 90% of my lectures. I don't even know how I made it to the second semester of second year. I'm not sure how I've been passing. But eventually that won't keep you in place. Eventually you will have to move, whether it's move forward or leave the program. And in my case, I left because I could no longer just pass, right? That's university tends to do that. Like, you can no longer like just pass, especially with the minimal effort, or in my case, almost no effort. And so I left. I didn't even know my depression got worse. But that's when I sort of started realizing it's like, hey, something's up. Maybe there is something that I'm dealing with that I'm not sure how to handle, or that I never knew that I had. And so I thought maybe I should go into art, because I always draw in class ever since like elementary school, high school, and even in university. So I follow art. I do a 1-year program. I actually complete a 1-year program, which would turn out to be the only program I ever complete. And then I try to get into animation. That was my big goal, was to get into animation at Sheridan College, the best college for animation around here. Got rejected twice. I was like, man, I thought this was my passion. Clearly it wasn't. It wasn't my passion, because if it was, I would be like in school all the time, nonstop drawing. Even that I didn't do. I didn't do that. Even in Sheridan, I skipped classes. I just didn't care. There was nothing enough to keep me there. There was nothing there to sort of completely take over my life and be obsessed with. I thought that might have been art, but it wasn't that. Yet I still pursued, because I'm like, I need something, because I don't have a degree or a college diploma. I got to keep finding something that maybe I could finish. And that was already a trap mindset, right? To have that mindset of just needing that paper. You just need it. I just need something to be that I completed. So I get accepted into George Brown. God knows how. I don't think my art was up to par, but I got into George Brown for game development, which, handles more on the asset side of video games. So art, 3D art, 2D art, concept art, all that stuff, which I loved, because back then I was really into video games. So I thought maybe this is it. Nope. 2 years into the program, once again, flopped out, missed classes, didn't practice enough, eventually failed some important courses that I didn't want to redo or retake, spent a whole bunch of money this time on OSAP, which I'm still paying for it to this day. So it just became one expensive lesson. All my post-secondary endeavors have just become, it's just this huge thing that reminds me of the mistakes that I've made and the consequences that I have to live with, which I'm okay with. I'm at peace with that. My family's at peace with that too. Like, my parents at first, when I quit nursing, they were devastated. But I think eventually they realized just, I didn't know like where I was supposed to go. And I still don't. But the difference is I'm okay with that. I know I just need to stay productive and try to be a good person. The good person that I know I can be. At the best of times and at the worst of times. So I'm okay with that now. Back then it was a very challenging time. The weight of the world is on your shoulders, when you're that age. It's the potential coming out of high school. It's so heavy, and you see all your peers, your friends, especially if they're doing well, you're like, what am I doing? I'm not even making money. These guys are making so much money now, and the years fly by, and you don't know what's going on, and you lose a handle on things. It's, if I'm sounding a little incoherent now, that's just how it was, It's like a blur, and it's so hard to keep up. I was chasing something that whole time. I was chasing for the reason behind my being here on this planet, on this earth. What am I here for? I looked for it in academics. I looked for it in social circles. I looked for it in career. I looked for it in all the conventional places people would measure success against, or happiness in life against. And that turned out to be a trap. Again, another trap. Because I chased those things, and I wasn't particularly the best at those things. So for a long time I thought, what the hell am I good for? Why am I here? Right? Academically, I sucked. Career-wise, non-existent. I bounced all over the place for work, which I didn't even talk about in my work history. I bounced all over the place. We could talk about that in the future again. And socially, I was awkward. I wasn't a social butterfly. I didn't have a girlfriend. And, you know, in previous podcasts, you already know, like, my first girlfriend was... I had my first girlfriend, like, at 29, right? And so I looked for self-worth and value in myself and all these things, and I just couldn't find it. So I thought my life was forfeit. I thought it was just like, what's the point? Right? And I completely missed what made me me. I completely missed the light within myself. And that is, I leave a positive impact around the people that I interact with day to day, whether it be my family, my friends, or my coworkers. And no, this is not me saying that I'm a perfect person, that, you know, I'm like this beam of light that's always leaving everyone in a positive mood. Of course not. I'm human. I have struggles. I have days where I'm not like that, where I'm a little standoffish, or I'm difficult to sort of approach or socialize with. It happens to me. My friends, my coworkers, my family, they can attest to that. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I'm okay with that, though, because I accept that. I accept and am very well aware that I'm just a human, and I have human limits, and that because I'm human, I'll run into tough times. I'll run into errors that I have to learn from. And that's okay. That's totally okay. It's just part of life. And I understand that more than ever now. And so I went on this huge ramble about my life history, and I said I wanted to keep it short. I realize it's like 28 minutes in now, and that's me trying to rush through the history of my life. And obviously I didn't cover the relationships and stuff, because I had an extensive mini series of that several episodes back. So if you want to go watch it, check it out. I think it's like episode 7, 8, and 9. But I wanted to share that because when I was talking to Scott at work, when we were having our conversations while working, it sort of prompted or triggered my mind to think about my life a little bit, and how much I struggled, and how much that pressure and the anxiety weighed on me. How much pressure I felt to try to do something or to find a purpose, else I become this lost, wandering, and frankly, pointless soul. And now that I look back on it, those difficult times in my life were necessary for me to be the person that I am today, to be the man that I am today, which I have no regrets about being. I'm happy with who I am today. I mean, I'm not going to stay like this forever. I'm still continually looking to improve and to better myself and to grow as a person, as a man, as a human being, continue evolving and trying to be a good person in this world that, you know, it continually feels like it's getting worse, right? I mean, we just got out of this pandemic, and then there's like things going on all over the globe, the protests in Iran, the seemingly never-ending war between Russia and Ukraine because Russia invaded Ukraine like the beginning of this year. The natural disasters. It's like when you're that age, you're like, what is there to look forward to? What's the point, right? But then you think about the past. You think about your parents and their parents and how they also went through these what were catastrophic times, but at that time too, seemingly like the end of everything. Like, what's the point of doing all this? What's the point of trying to find a meaningful life? And so I know it sounds cheesy and maybe benign to say, but we kind of have to hang on to hope. Hang in there, that things will be okay. And one of the best ways to do that is to do all of this, to navigate life, is to make sure that you check in with yourself on a regular basis. Maybe not every day, but maybe like once a week, a couple times a week. Start with that. Sit down, give yourself some quiet, and really talk to yourself. And I say this over and over again, and I'll never stop saying it because it's such a powerful tool. Start talking to yourself like you are a good friend, right? To yourself. Take the attitude you have with how you talk to your closest friends and how you would treat them when they're down or when they're dealing with depression and anxiety and other mental health issues. You would treat them with kindness, right? You would treat them with consideration. You would want to make sure that you're there for them so that you can help them whenever they need it, so that they can hang on and find better days, which you do find better days. So try to think of yourself when you have these conversations with yourself. Approach it as if you're approaching a friend like that. Check in with yourself. Find out where you're at, how you're feeling. It really helps. And then from there you can build towards something great, something positive. Eventually to accepting yourself and to eventually loving yourself, which is so important in living a life that feels fulfilling and worth living. And the other thing that we can do to help with all of that is learning to be grateful for everything that we have in life. And as always, I do not want to trivialize or downplay people who are in very, very difficult and challenging situations, sometimes horrific and unimaginable, because, obviously these words that I'm saying in certain situations that I just mentioned now, it's tough to find things to be grateful about, because sometimes just being alive isn't something you're grateful for because of a situation, right? But it doesn't have to be that. It's not necessarily something that you have to be grateful for is to be alive. Of course, you want to be grateful for being alive, because every day you get a chance to live, enjoy life, and maybe be better for yourself and for others, which is an amazing thing. We need that. Be grateful for your family. Be grateful for your friends, if they're around, if your family's around. Or even if you're feeling down, if you're lucky enough to have a house or an apartment or somewhere to live, be grateful for that. Because it's not easy to have that in this world. To have shelter, to have food. It's not a guarantee. And if you have those things, even as simple as those things, those are some of the necessities in life. And if you have a way to make sure that you have those things, you have to be grateful. You have to be thankful that you have those things. Because then that gratefulness can help carry you through dark times and potentially find some light, which can then help in finding more of that light to shine on your life so that you can grow and move on and move forward. World Mental Health Day is coming up this weekend, and this episode is dedicated to that. On October 10th, it is World Mental Health Day. It is a time for us to think about mental health and what that means. Especially these days, stigmatization is getting better in terms of, people are starting to understand better and are being more considerate of mental health and the issues that come along with mental health and mental health illnesses. One thing to also consider is that there is a huge acceleration of people developing mental health issues because of the pandemic, especially the early days in 2020 where people were isolated. So we have this opportunity on the 10th as a global community, as a world, to focus on mental health, on what that means to you, to your loved ones, and to your surrounding community. Have a conversation. Talk to a friend. Ask someone how they're doing. Or maybe open up to somebody and share what you're going through. To somebody that you love or you trust. Or even a coworker you're good friends with. I know it's scary and intimidating to do so sometimes, but you would not believe how accepting and how open some people are. But you have to give it a chance. And I know that initial barrier is tough to find somebody to do that with, but trust me, you probably have somebody in your life you can do that with. You are not alone, ever, in any of this. Everyone going through mental health struggles share. They all share the same heavy load. You're not alone. Everyone that's going through this, even though, physically you're not together, we're all fighting this together. We're all finding a way out of this together. And that gives me hope. That gives me strength as a person who still struggles with mental health issues to this day. That gives me strength to know that others are fighting just as hard as I am against this invisible enemy, if you want to call it, or invisible adversary that you need to deal with, make small and make friends with. People out there care for you. People out there love you. You're not alone in any of this, ever. Thanksgiving is also coming up. So that also gives us a time to reflect on the things that we're grateful for and thankful for, which I was also just talking about. So it's a beautiful weekend to think about these things. It's World Mental Health Day and it's Turkey Day. It's Thanksgiving Day. So I implore all of us, and I will be doing this too, to take some time for ourselves to reflect, get into good conversations with the people that we love and we care about, talk about mental health, and on Thanksgiving, whether or not you celebrate it the traditional way or non-traditional way, that gives us an opportunity to really think about the things we're thankful for in this world. And so with that, I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving, a happy Turkey Day, and a happy World Mental Health Day. Enjoy the weekend. Have fun. Be safe. I'll see you all next time. Take care.